Hi, this is a lesson on all about gouges, and this is an introduction to just how to identify the tools, what to look for, and what brands are reliable, and I'm going to introduce you to just a basic beginner set of tools and how to identify them by numbers. So we're just going to go through a lot of information on just an introduction to the wonderful world of gouges. Now, first of all, I wanted to introduce you to the difference between a straight gouge, which is this one, and a fishtail. As you can see, they come out, these pretty much straight all the way up the full metal, and this is thin here, and then right at the very end it splays out. And I've got a few different ones, and this splays out there. So sometimes it's called a fantail, spade. I call it a fishtail. And I started out with these straight ones. That was the set that I had. I pretty much had 5 or 6 straight gouges like this, and they work fine. But once I started sort of expanding and getting a few more gouges, I started getting the fishtail ones. And once I started getting those and purchasing those, it ended up being my favorite set. Now when I go travel, it's interesting because I pack up my favorite tools, and I realize that every single one of them, if I have that in the size, every single one of my favorite tools are fishtails. So it's been this interesting evolution. Those are just the ones I grab immediately. So as you can see, they come out to a nice sharp point, and very, very handy to get into little corners. There's not a lot of bulkiness around the metal here, so if I'm doing some cuts like this, it doesn't end up sort of getting in the way. For instance, there's a large one here. This is quite a large one, and then it's very bulky if I try to do any sort of twisting cuts like that. So sometimes it's just the ease of handling them. They're a little bit more delicate, although they are pretty substantial too, so it's not like they're any weaker. And one of the complaints or sort of the issues that people question about the fishtails is, well, after a couple times sharpening them, won't the actual width get narrower? And yes, the truth is, as the length gets shorter, the width of the blade gets narrower. But this tool in particular, this is my 314. I've had this for about 20 years now, maybe more. And when you sharpen them, unless you really have to grind metal off, you sharpen such a minute amount of metal off the tip that it really is insignificant. And so when you're weighing up the sort of pros and cons of the straight and the fishtail, I wouldn't use that really as a reason not to get fishtails. Maybe after 100 years of carving, it may be a smaller one. But at that point, who cares? Just use it as a smaller one. I think the benefits outweigh that as an issue. So again, it's just a much nicer, I get into corners a lot nicer, easier with the fishtails. And anyway, that is my preference. However, they do end up getting a little bit more expensive, usually sometimes maybe 10 to 20% more expensive per tool. So that could be an issue also if you're on a budget and the straight gouges work fine. Okay, so don't worry about that. They stay sharp, they hold a good edge, everything is pretty much the same in that way. It's just simply the areas that you might be able to get into are a little bit easier with the fishtails. Okay, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the brands of tools. Now I've got several different ones here. This one is a Swiss made, you can barely see it, it's an old one, or Feil, P-F-E-I-L is the name, and that is a very good quality tool. This is an Ariu, this is a French brand, And this is Dastra. This is actually a newer Dastra. And this one is an older Dastra. The Dastra ones are the ones I originally purchased when I started. This is actually one of my original sets. But as you can see, I've got a variety. I've got a lot of antique ones. The V-chisel I have is Austrian, or Stubai. You can see that's also a good quality brand. So basically, I'm just going to list through pretty much in alphabetical order, not in preference necessarily, but alphabetical order about some of the tools, brands that are out there, and they're all European, English, German, Swiss, Austrian, or French. So we've got Ashley Isles, which is English, the Ariu, which is French, Dastra, German, Henry Taylor, which is English, and we've got Hirsch, which is German. We've got File, which is Swiss, Two Cherries, which I believe are German. Yes, I believe so. And then there's Stubai, which are Austrian. Okay, so it seems like sort of German, Austrian, Swiss sort of cornered the market, but they really make very good quality tools. And then there's a few English brands too. Now I have pretty much stuck with the Dastra, the Swiss made, or the File, same thing, Swiss made, File are the same. And the Austrian Stubai and the Ariu. And so I've sort of stuck with those, get a few little interspersed of the other brands, but and sometimes you just get stuck with what you prefer, and you know, hard to break out of it. But all of those brands I have heard, and I've tested them either through students bringing them to class. I've been able to test them, and they're all very good quality and very reliable tools. So a lot to choose from, a lot to shop for, and they do slightly vary from brand to brand. The shapes of, like, you get one number and you try to match it to another number, and there's sometimes slight variations. So ideally, if you really wanted to just make sure everything was nice and organized and matching and all that, ideally you can stick with pretty much the same brand. But as you can see behind here, they're all over the place. And then you've got the antique tools, which, you know, you can get unlimited ones with that. Going on eBay is very dangerous for me, so I stayed away from that. But you know, the interesting thing is my favorite set of tools ends up being no more than maybe, I mean, this is talking about any very complex project, no more than 10 to 15 gouges that I use. And which is interesting because, as you can see back there, I like tools. So I don't want to limit you to 10 to 15 because you can always buy more, and you know, he or she with the most tools wins. He or she who dies with most tools wins, but I'm planning on using them a lot. But anyway, but that is the game, you know. You can. Then the thing is, if you're using a lot of them and you get them dull, you just put them aside, and then you've got extra ones you can, you know, use in place. So that's another benefit of having a lot of tools. So anyway, feel free to shop. There's a lot out there. Now I wanted to show you how to identify the tools, and these are generally pretty straightforward across the board between all brands, except for a few little exceptions. So I'm just going to start. First of all, there's two numbers. The first number represents the curvature, and the second number represents the width in millimeters. I believe some of the English tools, I think it might be Ashley Isles, that represent them in actual inches, quarter inch, eighth inch, whatever. But I've never really used that very much. But most of them are millimeters, and they actually label them on the tools. So let me just show you from here. This is a number 3 6 millimeter, and this, it says number 3 there, and it does not say 6. So that part, oh, I think on the actual, yeah, right there. But that's all faded because I use this a lot. And let's see here, we've got the are you for number 7/6? If you can see on the front there, number 7 curvature. Okay, looking at the curvature and a 6mm. Okay, so that's pretty much how we're identifying them. So as the numbers start from number 1, it's a very flat chisel. Number 1, flat chisel, and then number 2, that's where some of the brands vary. Number 2 generally is a curved gouge that's just slightly more curved than a flat. All right, so then as the numbers increase from number 1 all the way to a number 11, the curvature increases. Sometimes the number 2 refers to a skew chisel, which is just a flat chisel with an angle on the blade. Okay, so that can get a little complicated when you're dealing with number 2s. But pretty much from number 3 all the way to a number 11 is similar. They refer to number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and as the numbers increase, the curvature increases up to a number 11, which is actually shaped like a U. Okay, and they range anywhere from 1mm thin all the way up to, I've seen them, oh goodness, I don't even know what the maximum, 50mm, but they're big shovels. In fact, this is one. This is a number 7, 50mm, and I have a feeling it probably gets even larger than that, but you can tell I use this one a lot. A lot with a mallet. To show you my ideal set of starting gouges, and this is a small set, and this is really based more on budget. If you just wanting to get a taste of starting to wood carve, and you don't necessarily want to buy 10, 15, 20, 30 or more gouges right off the bat, just to see if this is something you're interested in doing. So I've limited the starter set to 6 tools. And this is, I've got some numbers that I've chosen that are sort of my ideal numbers, but if you happen to have something, or you see something, or maybe whatever brand that you're purchasing doesn't have that exact one, if you move maybe up from basically a width, ideally, well, for instance, this is number 3, 6mm. If you go up from a number 3 to a number 3/7, or possibly even a number 3/8, it's still possible that you can use that in replacement of this. So it's not just locked in as these are the only tools you could possibly ever use for the set. So it is flexible, and as you see in some of my videos, I show how to use a lot of these tools in many, many different ways. And as I mentioned before, I started out with a very small amount of tools, probably about this many, for about the first couple years, and I learned how to do what I needed to carve with this limited number of tools. So, and there are a lot of different shapes to create with these, so there are different techniques of making them do a little bit more different work. So, as I said, there is flexibility here. Don't get locked in if this is the only tool that is for this exact cut. Okay, you can also, if maybe you don't have a number 3, maybe move up to a number 4 of that same width. So anyway, a lot of it is very flexible with that. Now the first tool I have here for my set is a 6mm V-chisel. Now this V-chisel has a 60-degree angle, and that is really ideal for doing the kind of work that I do. If it gets any larger than that, it gets a little awkward and removes too much wood. And that's really just the one that I started out with and I became comfortable with. And 6mm is just a good size to get the depth that I like to go. And anything really large, you get these really large V-chisels, you try to push them through the wood, and it has to remove so much wood that it actually gets awkward. Now if you're going to be doing some really big sculpture work, then wail away at it with a larger V-chisel. But for what I do and sort of the little bit more delicate relief carving, a 6mm is ideal. Again, if you need to move down to a 5mm, because I believe the File brand does not offer a 6mm. So that happens quite often where the brands themselves don't just offer, they skip over some sizes or curvatures. So move up or down either a 5mm or a 7mm, and that should work fine too. This next one, this is a number 3 6mm, and this is my favorite gouge. I use this pretty much when I have any part where no other tool works. This will always work. I will make it work. And it really is just a wonderful size and wonderful curvature. But again, if you can't find this, and I do know that the File brand only offers it in fishtail, so if you're looking for a number 3/6 in a straight, you won't find it there. Some of the other brands offer it in straight, but again, the fishtail, it just gets in those nice little corners. The next one here is a number 3/14, and so this is a number 3 curvature, 14mm wide. And the number 3s, these two number 3s, quite often I use that for backgrounding, for lowering down the background. If I try to use like a flat chisel or something like that, lowering down the background, it would sort of tend to dig in on the flat corners. So that's why I take something that's slightly curved and to do that. Now this is used for a lot of shaping also, but it's used for a lot of backgrounding. Now one thing to consider, you may also want to, instead of using the 3s, they have the number 2s, which are a little flatter but still have a slight curve to it. I have never actually gotten into purchasing number 2s because when I started they weren't really available. So again, you get used to using what you start with. But those can be replaced, especially for doing that backgrounding. Number 2s are perfect for that. Slightly curved and not so curved that they'll actually create gouge marks in the background. So consider that also. You may want to, if you're doing a lot of backgrounding and that type of thing, a lot of lowering down the backgrounding and flattening the background. Okay, the next one is a number 7/6, and again this is number 7 curvature and 6mm wide. And this next one is a number 5/14, number 5 curvature, 14mm wide. And this is number 7 curvature, 14mm wide. So this is just a good overall set. Now it's interesting that I sort of picked the 6mm and the 14mm. Again, this is just what you start out with and you get comfortable with using particular tools. And so as I fill in, then I just go in between those numbers. So I take odd numbers and so number 3s, 5s, 7s, and then the 6mm and 14mm. That kind of covers a lot of the basics, and then just fill in with 10mm or 12mm of that same curvature, and that sort of fills in the gaps once you start getting into more detailed carvings. I'm going to show you a set of tools that would be sort of the next step if you're going to be purchasing or increasing your sets. So let me just start. This is a number 1 flat chisel, and it's a 14mm wide flat chisel. And this is a Henry Taylor. Now what I like about this one is that it has a single bevel. It's flat on the one side, but it has a bevel on the other. Quite often you see carving flat chisels that have a double bevel on it, and it gets a little awkward sometimes. I like to use it as if it were 2 different gouges. I can turn it over and use it completely differently, whether it's upside down or right side up. So I like the variety of that. So yeah, if you can find it out there, I bought this quite a few years ago, so I don't know if Henry Taylor still offers the double or the single-sided bevel, but if you can find it, it makes a big difference. This is a number 3 3mm, number 3 curvature, 3mm wide, and this is just one of those little tiny ones that can fit into areas that get a little awkward. This is a larger number 3, number 3/18, again for doing a lot of that sort of lowering down the background and getting a surface leveled. And then if you get a larger gouge, the number 3, you can just level the larger surface. Okay, and this is a number 5 6mm. This is sometimes a little awkward to find. You might have to go up to a 5.5 or a 5.7, just depending on what is offered. And this is, I believe, once they get 6 millimeters or below. Sometimes they start limiting them in fishtail because obviously the whole fanning out gets to be limited if you have a very thin tool. There's not much room to make it fan. Okay, and also one thing about that the fishtail is the larger the curve, you need to consider the larger the curve, the less really important the fishtail is. Because if you imagine a big curve, like maybe a number 10 or a number 9 or number 8, the larger the curve, those corners that are so important aren't really going to make that much difference. So that's something to consider also. And actually a lot of them don't offer them as fishtail up above a certain number for that same reason. So again, keep that in mind. All right, so let's go on to the next one. This is a number 7 10 millimeter, number 7 curvature 10 millimeters wide. And this is number 8 10 millimeter, number 8 curvature 10 millimeters wide. And this is something that's a little bit different. This is a number 11 3 millimeter. This is a veiner, and it's got flat walls on the side, but a tight corner on the outside here. And this is actually what I use. They call it a veiner, or number 11, and it's actually used for making veins. And I use this quite a lot if I was going to be doing a lot of acanthus leaves or something like that. This ends up making a lot of those detail lines that are required for that particular design. Okay, so and beyond that, I have a list of sort of the third step if you want to just keep going and adding to it. I have a lot of those listed on my website. And just so you can go further than that. But I think this is going to really help you get started in understanding how to identify the tools and what the differences are, and just you know, don't get too locked into this has to be the exact size. As you'll see in the videos, I use the tools in many different ways, and what's interesting is if I do a project one day and I use a particular amount of tools or number of tools and specific tools, and I do the same thing like a week later and just grab the tools off the shelf, they'll probably all be slightly different, but the results will be similar. So it really ends up being really understanding how to use the tools. But this is really just to help you get started, because sometimes it can be so frustrating trying to find those perfect tools and find that perfect set of tools. So again, refer to the website. There's a list of suppliers, and the list of tools that I have shown here are there, and just some other questions and answers that people have had along the way of particular questions about tools. So please feel free to read that if you want to get some more information. But again, this is just to get you started, so happy carving!